Hi everyone! Today I'm going to walk you through my process on how to make a plastic mini EUC using my 3D pen. Somebody in the comment section mentioned that I should give this a try, although I'm not very good at it, so please bear with me. If the title hasn't already spoiled it for you, I am trying to recreate the Inmotion V11. As you can see, I have printed out some pictures of the V11, and I actually spent a lot of time doing this because it is vital to get the proportions just right before I go into making it. Otherwise, the wheel will turn out really strange. So here I am measuring the width of the wheel, I imagine. And that round paper cutout will later guide me in terms of making a silicone mold. I use modeling clay to shape the mold, after which I will fill the mold with molten plastic. This is a method that took me many tries to accomplish, and it saves me a lot of time of having to print or extrude these layers of 3D filament one layer at a time, which is excruciatingly slow. So first I roll up that clump of clay into a ball, and then I compress it between a pair of acrylic sheets, and that will turn it into sort of like a pancake or like a hockey puck, which is kind of like your tire on an EUC. I also put on a podcast or some music in the background, usually by visiting YouTube, and sometimes I might look a little distracted looking at my laptop. So as you can see, I then overlay that paper cutout on top of my clay puck, and then I carefully measure out the margins and carefully cutting it with a metal ruler. And with a bit of time and patience, I eventually end up with a sort of roundish little clay hockey puck, which will serve as the basis for my mold. And here I whip out my trusty cookie cutter, and that would cut out a perfectly round shape.
Three days later.
And here you see I've created a silicone mold using that clay puck that I made. And the next task would be to turn on my 3D pen and extrude lots of molten plastic into the mold. Although I later discovered that it was much quicker to just cut the 3D filament into small little pieces directly into the mold, rather than printing it with my 3D pen. And after this, I will fire up the oven and put the mold in the oven at 210 degrees Celsius for about 5 to 7 minutes. I keep repeating the process until the entire mold is filled with molten plastic. I'm not sure if it's safe to bake PLA plastic in the oven, but hey, so far I'm still alive and breathing, so I guess all's good. And voila, I've turned it into a plastic puck ready to be processed. And now I start the long and arduous process of trimming that plastic puck down to specification. This is my mini drill press that I bought off AliExpress for $100. It is pretty reliable, and it's light and portable. I'm in love with this little thing. And I guess now would be a good opportunity to explain myself, mainly about how I got into this little hobby and why. I was inspired by someone making models with their 3D pen on YouTube, mainly because they were so patient and so creative with their use of many different tools. I think this appeals to my meticulous nature, and it's a good hobby to indulge in when it's too cold or too wet to ride outside. This hobby is not too expensive to get into, at least not to me. The 3D filaments were cheap enough to buy, and there are some tools I have to purchase, including this mini drill press and the 3D pen and a soldering iron, but otherwise they are very reliable and they're usually a one-off purchase. Unlike working with wood, plastic is also very forgiving. Any mistakes I make can be easily repaired by melting it down and having another go at it. There are no tutorials to teach me how to do this, but that is also partly the charm of this little hobby. Since there is no guidance, I can do whatever I want with it. This certainly appeals to my rebellious nature, as I have never been one to follow rules. Having said that, I am also a pragmatic person. I would not pursue this if I don't think there is a point to it. Fortunately, I seem to be getting better at my craft as I get more practice out of it. At least it doesn't seem like a waste of time or money to me. I have to admit that I have come across times of extreme frustration which almost led to me giving up, but I'm glad I persisted. On top of that, there are some long-term health hazards to consider, such as breathing in microplastics, which I am pretty sure I'm doing right now. Then again, why would I worry about microplastics if I ride the unicycle? The unicycle seems like a far more dangerous activity, in my opinion. Then again, just as I put on my helmet and knee pads when riding my electric unicycle, I also wear my respirator mask when making little EUCs. For those who wish to get into this, I have to warn you that it is a very boring hobby. And this brings me to my second health hazard, which is the risk of being sedentary for hours. Grinding down plastic like this can take a very long time, and I often suffer from bad posture and wrist pain from repeated motions. I have also considered setting hourly reminders to make sure I get up and move, but this is not always possible, especially when I am in the thick of it. Not only do I lose track of time, but I also become stubbornly persistent at getting the job done. Otherwise, I will obsess over it for hours on end. I suspect this is a creative struggle that plagues every artist out there. It is both the greatest source of our joy and torture. Let me know in a comment section if you can relate. In my opinion, everybody needs a set of complementary hobbies. One that is active and one that is passive. The active hobby works the body, while the passive works the mind. Boring as it may seem, grinding plastic is strangely meditative. And more than that, I actually have something to show for by the end of it. I do get very strange looks from people when I tell them what I do with my free time. But they are usually quite impressed with the end product, especially with all the fine details they can appreciate. Some people are just pleasantly surprised by the feeling they get from holding a plastic geometric shape in your hands. It's very tangible and somehow rewarding. I mean, think of all the things you put in your hands. When was the last time you held a solid cube or a pyramid or something else? Anyway, I digress. I wouldn't dare to claim to be very good at this, and I'm very much still an amateur. But I hope you learn something and find some joy while watching me fumble with plastic. As you can see, that plastic puck is slowly coming into shape as I measure its thickness. It's starting to look like an EUC tire, well, a mini EUC tire. And here you can see I'm adding the details to the tire by drilling holes in it. Without these holes or grooves, you would not be able to appreciate the motor that is attached to it. Sometimes I question my dedication to this part of the EUC. It seems to take up a lot of time, and most of it is concealed by the battery boxes. However, just because it is concealed underneath doesn't mean it is not important. I guess it is like having clean underwear. I apologize for that unfortunate analogy. And once I am satisfied with its dimensions, it is time to apply a coat of paint. And here I apply a coat of black grayish paint to the tire and a metallic silver to the rim to bring out the motor and the tire. By the time I'm done, hopefully it will start to look like this.
The next day.
Next, I will start by making the V11 side panel. I'm cutting out the side panel from the pictures I have printed. Finally, after 15 minutes into the video, I bust out my 3D pen. For those who don't know what a 3D pen is, it is a handheld tool that is used to extrude hot molten plastic to create a 3D object. So here I am drawing the outline of the cutout on my board, and then I'll extrude the plastic onto the board according to its margins. As you can see, the process is slow and painstaking. Not to mention, that is only one layer. I have about, I don't know, several hundred layers to go. Here I use baking paper because molten plastic does not stick to baking paper. I use it to create a smooth surface when melting the plastic on top of it. And now I sandwich the 3D printed part between the paper, and then I run a hot iron on top of it and flipping it over shortly after that. This creates a very smooth and even surface on both the top and the bottom of the 3D printed part. This process is vital in removing air pockets, which makes grinding and sanding that part much more predictable at a later stage. I then restart the process by adding another layer of plastic on top of it. And once I am satisfied with its thickness, I then whip out my rotary tool, which is my Dremel, and I grind it down to the exact specifications of the V11 side panel. Here, I'm grinding it in a box to catch any loose particles of plastic. Honestly, it's not very effective, but it is better than nothing. And for those who are curious of what it sounds like, well, here it is. Mesmerizing, isn't it? And here I'm using a lighter on the part to burn off any loose bits of plastic, and sometimes if I want to shape it. And when I'm done with it, hopefully it will start to look like this. And here I'm repeating the same process with the battery boxes. First, I cut it out from the picture, draw a rough outline on my board, and then I will print the plastic within its margins, layer by layer. and then I sandwich it between baking paper and run a hot iron over it. By now, you should catch the drift. And then I add another layer on top of it and repeat the whole process until I am satisfied with its thickness. And when it's thick enough, I will then tape the paper cutout to the plastic piece and then grind it down to its specifications. I then add some details to it by using my drill. I add some finishing touches with my Dremel. And by the time I'm done, hopefully it will start looking like this.
Three days later.
To create symmetry, I then made another silicone mold of the battery box and the side panel, which roughly take 3 days to cure. As you can see here, I have 2 side panels, while I add the finishing touch to one of them to make them look exactly identical. Achieving symmetry is the most frustrating part of the entire process, because if the EUC is asymmetrical, it will look really odd and out of proportion. But then again, perfect symmetry is impossible to achieve, but a little bit of asymmetry adds charm to it. I then repeated the process with the battery boxes. As you can see here, there are 2 somewhat identical battery boxes, while I add finishing touches to one of them. Here I can be seen making the pedals or the foot plates, but unfortunately, those parts are too small to be captured on camera. I might have to get a better camera in the future. But to explain the process, these foot plates are joined to the side panel. It has a hinge on the inside part of the foot plate. It functions very much like the hinge on your door that swings open and close, except this one swings up and down, and it is connected by a pin. To be precise, a 1mm pin. And hopefully when I'm done, it will look something like this. And here is a close-up of what it looks like. And then I start working on the headlight assembly using the same process of building it up layer by layer, running it through a hot iron, and grinding it down to shape. The headlight unit is particularly challenging because I intend to insert an LED into it, which means I had to hollow out the inside using my Dremel. By the time I'm done, I'm hoping it would look like this. And this is the end product. As you can see, there is a red wire and some LED legs sticking out of it. I also installed a switch on top of the headlight unit, which is where the switch on the V11 traditionally goes. The LED is shining through a transparent piece of acrylic I bought off the stationery store. And now I'm working on the tail light assembly. You already know the process, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But hopefully when I'm done, it will look something like this. And last but not least, I started working on the handlebar and the trolley handle. And hopefully when I'm done, it would look something like this. The handlebar and trolley handle is unique in the sense that I have decided to add some functionality to it by allowing it to hinge upwards. As you can see in the video, I am testing out the hinge. It is screwed in by another 1mm pin. The next part of the process was unfortunately or fortunately unrecorded. You see, just as I thought I knew what I was doing, I did not account for how tricky it would be fitting in 2 LEDs and a battery into this tiny EUC. And so I spent the next 12 hours of my life staring at the pieces and questioning my life's decisions. And then an idea came to me in a dream. It is true that taking naps boosts your productivity. And this allowed me to cram everything I need into this tiny EUC, thus pushing the process forward. As you can see here, there's lots going on. And now, all that's left for me to do is to glue the handlebar and the trolley handle to the top of the wheel. Before I finally cover everything up with the last remaining side panel. And now I can focus on the next long and arduous task of editing my videos to give you this. Wow, that was a long video. Thank you for sticking with me until the end. I'm not very good at making videos, but I hope you learned something from it. If you have any ideas on how to make this more educational or how to improve my video editing skills, please leave a comment in the comment section. Likewise, if you're curious about my methods and the tools that I use, please don't hesitate to ask. I hope to make more videos like this in the future, but hopefully not as long and boring. Okay, take care folks. See you later.